Genshin Impact has introduced several new characters last year. As to be expected, some of them were a bit underwhelming, but some were game-changing. How's it going, everyone? This is Kay, and I'll break down the top 3 5-star characters you should pull for in 2023. Now, the characters listed will only include those that were first released in 2022. I already made a video on previous characters before that, so it'll be pointless to recommend them again. There is also no particular order to this, since I recommend you getting all 3 if you can.
Here comes the catch.
Starting with the first character, Yelan will be one of the best Hydro enablers you'll ever use. Her only real competition is Xingqiu, who is regarded as the best Hydro enabler in Genshin, so that says a lot. Yelan functions similarly to Xingqiu, in which her Elemental Burst will be her most relied on ability. Her Elemental Burst basically has her creating a die which follows you around and shoots enemies with Hydro when you normal attack. This is similar to Xingqiu's Rain Swords, and that is the main reason why Xingqiu is regarded as the best Hydro enabler, and Yelan's burst is similar. With the rise in Dendro reactions, Hydro characters are used heavily for Bloom and Hyper Bloom teams. This means Yelan can pretty much fit into almost the same teams as Xingqiu, that includes Vape and Freeze builds. With Hydro Resonance, Yelan actually benefits more from having another Hydro thanks to the boost in HP stats, which her damage scales off of. Now the question becomes, why should you pull for Yelan if you already have Xingqiu? Yelan focuses more on damage thanks to her A4, which is a support damage buff for the active character. As long as her burst is active, your on-field DPS will increase their damage by 1%. Afterwards, damage will increase by 3.5% every second with a max of 50% boost. Basically, it's maxed right when her burst ends at 15 seconds. So the longer her burst remains, the more damage you'll inflict. This adds significantly more additional damage compared to Xingqiu. Yelan can also be more offensive due to her breakthrough charge shots, which she can fire at the start of battles. Her elemental skill can also mark multiple enemies to deal damage, even possibly resetting her breakthrough shots. Most importantly, her skill has a 10-second cooldown, which is less than Xingqiu's skill. Not only will that be useful for damage, but Yelan will charge her burst faster. Xingqiu, on the other hand, has more utility. He can heal, reduce damage, and most importantly, help with interruption resistance, which can be very helpful for certain characters. He also has slightly better Hydro application compared to Yelan, since the water sword spinning around can infuse Hydro to enemies if it touches them. For close combat, this will help out a lot more. So despite you having Xingqiu, you can still gain many benefits by having Yelan. They also have great synergy together, where both characters can help charge energy for one another. On top of that, if you have Xingqiu at C2, he can reduce enemies' Hydro resistance, which will increase both their damage. By having them together, you'll gain Hydro Resonance as mentioned before. Having 2 Hydras will also affect Yelan's A1 a bit, since having the same element types in your team will decrease her HP bonus from that skill, but that shouldn't force you to change your team builds. Think of it as an extra bonus. Now, if you don't want to use them together, then separating them on Abyss teams can give you more options. Let's say, for example, you want to use the national team, which requires Xingqiu, since he's a staple in that team. If you have Yelan, you can then use her for Hyper Bloom teams on Abyss, again giving you more options. On top of all that, her skill can be used for travel, which may not sound like much, but can be very useful for exploration or just collecting materials. Few things to remember: her ER takes priority until you're certain she can use her burst every rotation. Her burst is required, and without it, she doesn't really offer much else. It's highly recommended you have 4-piece emblem on her as well. So breaking it down, Yelan is comparable to the best Hydro enabler in the game. Great as a sub DPS who can buff your main DPS's damage, has strong synergy with a lot of characters, basically making her flexible in team builds, and she is great for traveling. Yelan hands down will be a strong asset, and I highly recommend her.
Make yourselves a room.
Next is Nahida, who can be regarded as the best Dendro enabler and driver, at least for now, since future Dendro characters may or may not be better than her in certain roles. Her elemental skill is the most vital kit to her role. Her elemental skill can be tapped or held to mark enemies. All marked enemies will be linked together within a certain distance, and when you trigger a reaction, all linked enemies will get hit with Dendro damage, which scales off of her attack and EM. The interval between the skill damage is 2.5 seconds. This is what allows you to constantly infuse Dendro to enemies, because every time you trigger a reaction, Dendro damage will be inflicted as long as they have the mark. So a quick breakdown between her and Dendro Traveler, because many players do compare the two. DMC is better than Nahida for battles that involves waves of enemies. His burst will stay on field and can continue to apply Dendro even after killing enemies, while Nahida, on the other hand, needs to be actively switched on field to use her skill whenever new enemies spawn. Now, despite that one flaw, her Dendro application has 100% uptime, meaning enemies will always have Dendro status. Of course, you'll have to reapply the mark from time to time, but her cooldown is only 6 seconds, while the skill's duration lasts 25 seconds. Basically, you'll always have her E-skill ready. This is why Nahida is so strong in non-wave battles, specifically boss battles. You can instantly apply her skill and quick swap her out, allowing you to pull off your rotations, unlike DMC for example, who needs ER to spam his burst. Nahida does not require energy to apply consistent Dendro. Her A4 passive will also make building her slightly easier, since the more EM she has, her damage and crit rate from her skill will increase. Getting the right EM artifacts can be somewhat of a hassle, especially since it's one of the lowest main stat drop rates, but this can allow you to build an all EM build for Nahida, which goes well with her burst. Speaking about her burst, it's a utility ability that summons a shrine and will change in effects based on what elements you have on your team. Having Pyro will increase her skill's tick damage, Hydro will increase her burst duration, and Electro will make her Tri-Karma trigger faster. Having two of the same elements will further boost the effect. Combined this with her A1 passive, it can give a tremendous EM boost to the active character. Since Dendro reactions rely on elemental mastery, it's a phenomenal buff for the ones triggering reactions, which can also include Nahida herself. Now just remember, it's only for the active character. All field characters do not gain the EM buff. Now, what makes Nahida a reliable driver as well is because of her Catalyst weapon type. All normal and charge attacks will have Dendro, and instead of relying on a skill which has cooldowns or a burst which requires energy, simple attacks from her can trigger bloom reactions, for example. Future Dendro DPS characters may replace her for this driver role, but as of right now, she's the most consistent we have. So here's a character who is strong in both quick swap plays and can be used to trigger reactions, who can also boost EM stats for your ally or herself, making reactions stronger, or whoever your main DPS is. You can have her support your Electro character for quicken teams, or have her as the active character for Bloom or Hyper Bloom builds. Without a doubt, Nahida is one of the best characters you'll ever get, and if you can afford to get her at C2, then she'll be even stronger. Most importantly, she can collect plants from a distance. That's a very convenient ability.
All eyes on me!
The third character you must pull is Nilou. Yes, she's a very situational and restrictive character in terms of team builds. That alone can be a flaw which may affect your decision in pulling her, but regardless of that restriction, Nilou has risen to be one of the best characters that was released in 2022. Now, it's not a requirement, but you should have Nahida because she's the one that made Nilou teams more powerful, so much so that Nilou's usage rate in Abyss has increased. So why is she good? Her greatest strength mainly comes from her A1 passive, which when using a team of only Dendro and Hydro characters, after finish casting her entire E-skill combo, Nilou will let your team create a special bloom known as Bountiful Chords that is far more effective than regular blooms. You would trigger these special blooms the same way, by applying Dendro and Hydro together or vice versa, but they explode faster, deal more damage, and has a bigger AoE. Her A1 also increases EM when your character is hit by Dendro, which should happen since you'll get hit by the special bloom explosions. Nilou's A4 also synergizes with her A1. For every 1000 HP above 30k from Nilou's overall health will increase the special bloom's damage by 9%, having a max of 400%. So you absolutely need to stack HP artifacts and get her HP well above 30k to use this effect. Now, it's a good thing Nilou can be an effective Hydro enabler and driver as well. Her E-skill has two stances. One will transform all her normal attacks to Hydro, making her the driver for the team. If this is the case, use EM bonus artifacts. Her second stance will leave a Hydro ring that doesn't deal damage, but will infuse Hydro to enemies touched by it. This makes her the Hydro enabler for the team, as you can swap her out for your Dendro driver like Nahida. Both roles are equally as effective, so you shouldn't have to worry about triggering her special blooms. Her burst also deals Hydro damage, so it's another tool to be used. Since you'll typically have at least one Hydro character, you'll take advantage of the Hydro Resonance, which increases HP, therefore helping Nilou even more. Nilou Blooms is very effective against mobs of enemies since you're basically blowing up the whole entire field. Now, despite the restrictive team, Nilou is actually very future-proof, at least for now. As long as new Dendro characters get introduced, even Hydro characters if there's synergy, Nilou Bloom teams has the possibility to become even stronger. For example, instead of using Nahida as the main driver, maybe a Dendro DPS who can specialize in on-field damage while being able to create Nilou Blooms with attacks, or maybe a Dendro healer who can act as either an off-field enabler or a driver similar to Kokomi's burst. Yes, Nilou teams are restrictive, but the combination between her ease of use, strong damage, and potential team growth makes her one of the best 5 stars to have been released last year. Now, I would personally recommend getting Nahida first, then Nilou. Again, Nahida plays a vital role for Nilou teams. Well, there you have it, the top 3 5 stars you must pull this year once their rerun banners are out. Now, this doesn't mean other 5 stars are bad. Yeah, Miko has seen a rise in usage, Shinhe is a phenomenal cryo support, Xinu is quite powerful, I'm personally a Scaramouche main, max out all his talents, farm for his artifacts for like a month or so, well over a month actually because I've been having horrible RNG luck, but the most important thing is, go for the character you'll enjoy using the most. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for future Genshin Impact videos. Good luck on your polls everyone, don't forget to comment down below to let me know who you're pulling for in 2023.